Right, I think let's go. If a couple of more people join, I'll just let them in as we go. It's a bit of a one-man show here today, so if you'll just give me a little bit of grace, that'll be awesome. So for those of you that are visiting, my name is Pierre. I've been a speaker for about the last 10, 15 years. I'm an author. I preach a little bit on a Sunday. So some of you know me from that like context. And then this is part of something that we call the Paleastra. So I'm just sharing my screen over there. So the Paleastra is something that we've built that that there you go. Let me just admit one more person. So the Paleastra is an online community of practice. And we get together once a month and I do a talk. Sometimes we have a little bit of a conversation and we just work together or do practices together to become and try and become like better human beings. So that's the whole thing about Paleastra. If you're interested in it, you can go check it out at paleastra.co.za. It's like a subscription thing. We send out crazy newsletters like every week. This week was about joy and the history of drag queens, and then about a ballet school in Nigeria, and all sorts of crazy, wonderful, and weird things. So if you like stuff like that, then you're welcome to join us. And that's it. There are no more further sales pitches throughout this whole event because I hate that. You join like a webinar and you're waiting the whole webinar going, when's the sales pitch? When's the sales pitch? When's the sales pitch? So that was it. And there's not going to be any more. So I'm really, really glad you're here. If you are watching on your computer, I would advise you, or I invite you to, at the top of your screen, there's a little button that says you can do side-by-side view, and then you can drag it over. So it's like 50% me and 50% my slides, which kind of, I think, gives a best kind of experience. Or you can just watch the slides because they're really pretty. I really like making pretty slides. So today we are working with something, a topic that I really, really am very, very passionate about. It's the title of the talk is Ora et Labora. And Ora et Labora is about meaning. Ora means talk or prayer, and Labora means work. So just before you get super anxious, this is not a sermon. It's something else. It's about meaning in life and meaning in business. And I think just lately, especially in the last 5 months, with everything being so nuts and so crazy, I think we're desperate in all of this craziness. We are desperate just for some meaning, just for something to kind of hold on to and go, this gives us structure. And I believe that there's a lot of lessons to be learned in this tradition of Ora et Labora. And I'm really passionate about work, about the way we work. I often work with artists and graphic designers and all these creative people where they're creating these awesome works. So I love work and the idea of work and how we work as human beings. And it fascinates me no end. So this is my son. If you want to take a quick look at the screen there, if you've clicked away already, then this is my son, Luther. Yes, he's named after the reformer, Martin Luther. So this is my son, Luther. He's about 3 or 4 years old there. And this was back in our old house back in Pretoria. We now live in Cape Town. And he told me one day, this is just at that age. I don't know if you've got kids, then you'll know this. Like there's a certain age where they realize they start to understand this concept of money, or the concept of money, and that money can like buy you things. So if you look on the left of the screen, there's this little like Lightning McQueen wallet. So he came to me in his little 3-year-old self and said, Dad, I want to do a little chore. In Afrikaans, a werkie. For all those Americans joining us today and people from overseas, like werkie, like a little job, like a little chore. I want to do a job so I can get money. And I said, sure, you can go and do a job. And he just turns around and walks back into my office, opens up my laptop, and then starts punching away at the keys, going da da da. And then after a while comes back and goes, I want my money now because I just worked, because I see Daddy work like that every single day, because that's in his mind what work is. And that just blew my mind, because can you imagine even 20, 30 years ago that what you would be doing for most of your working day was to sit in front of a computer typing away? Or even 100 years ago, 150 years ago, work did not mean this, right? So work changes a lot, and that's sort of part of the discussion. So human beings, we build stuff. That's what we do. If you look around you, every single thing that you can see on your desk or wherever you are has been built, right? And this is what we do as human beings. We go and we organize and we reorganize and we build stuff. So the thing is that we can either choose to build stuff for good, or we can build stuff for evil. And the sad thing about it is that only sort of 1 in 5 people, even though this is our essence, only 1 in 5 people are really actually kind of content and happy at work. This was a survey done by Gallup a couple of years ago, where they asked a couple of million people in the US, are they engaged at work? Right? Do they love their jobs? And only 1 in 5 is engaged. If you can imagine your company, like only 20% of the people actually want to be there. So, and then 2 of the people, or three of the people are disengaged, meaning they don't really care. They're sort of apathetic. And then the other one, the last 20%, is somebody that's like actively disengaged. And this was done across like multiple industries, multiple types of jobs, multiple workplaces, that 1 in 5 people are actively disengaged. And I think that's like 20% of your people. 20% of your people are actively disengaged, and only 20% of your people are engaged. And that's like a massive problem. And so we have this massive problem in work. Why are people this disengaged? I read this really fascinating study. It said that if you pull all the statistics about heart attacks, the most likely time that you'll get a heart attack, or the most likely time that you will die and from a heart attack, would be, I mean, guess what? Guess what time? Right? Look at this quote on the screen now. More people die Monday morning at 9 a.m. than any other time. And people would rather die than go to work. And that should tell us something. If the statistics, so on a Monday, you're most likely to die from a heart attack. And then by Friday, your chances drop to like practically 0. So there's something really wrong here, because work is something that humans do. It's something that's supposed to be meaningful. And we all think like, if I were to ask you, if you were to win the lotto, or somebody comes up to you and says, here's like $5 million, like, you know, you'd be pretty happy and you'd quit and do all sorts of crazy things on your boss's desk or whatever. And but the truth is, when we don't work, we actually aren't that happy. It's not good for us to be completely idle. This professor, whose name I cannot pronounce for the life of me, says that when working, people from assembly line workers all the way to surgeons report feeling generally strong, creative, satisfied. When free to do whatever they want in their free time, they tend to feel weak and dull and dissatisfied. So work does make us happy. Most of us would rather work than not do anything. So the question then is why are so many people disengaged at work? Like, why do so many people then find their work completely meaningless? Does it maybe have to do does it have something to do with like the type of job that you do? Maybe if you were helping refugees or working with excuse me, working with disabled kids, then your job would be more meaningful, or you'd be more engaged. And there was another interesting study that was done that read, excuse me, that said that they did this survey across multiple careers, across multiple sort of vocations and jobs, and said that they found that about 1 in 3, like it's sort of similar stats to the Gallup study, 1 in 3 people find their work meaningful, right? But like the kicker here is, it didn't matter whether you were the CEO or the janitor. And it didn't matter what type of industry you were in, whether you were a teacher or you were an accountant. Like the percentage of people that found their work meaningful was exactly the same. And that's like really crazy, because we think that if only I can get this job, if only I can do that, then I'd be really engaged. But that's not the truth. Something completely different is actually going on. There's a story, and I tell this story often for the Paleastrians that have been in these sessions. I've told this story a couple of times because I think it's so telling. and it's so good. It says so much about human nature. So there's a story about three men who were working on a cathedral, right? And then one day the priest or the abbot actually walked past and started asking these three men questions. And he walked past the first guy and said, "What are you busy doing?" And he said, "Can't you see what I'm doing?" He's like, "What are you, idiot? Can't you see what I'm doing? I'm busy putting one brick on top of another." And then the priest walked further along and he spoke to the next guy and he said, "What are you doing, sir?" And he said, "Well, I'm busy providing for my family." And he walked further along and to the last man and said to him, "Well, what are you busy doing?" And he said, "I'm busy building a house for the divine." So it's the stories that we tell ourselves about the work that we do that matters. That's actually what gives us meaning, right? And I think our problem is in the world today, in the last kind of 100 to 150 years, we've exchanged meaning. We've replaced our need for transcendence, and we've replaced that with cash, and hence we lost all meaning. And there was in the early 20th century, there was a very famous strike where a bunch of factory workers went on strike and they sang this song, which just encapsulates this idea for me so completely. It says they sang, "Hearts starve as well as bodies. Give us bread, but give us roses." Meaning that I don't only need money. I don't only need bread. I also need meaning. And I think our world is changing and the world of work is shifting and changing, where throwing money at somebody is no longer enough. People are demanding different things. In the middle of last year, there was an article in the Harvard Business Review where it stated that move fast and break things, like the famous motto from Mark Zuckerberg, the Facebook founder, "Move fast and break things," is now a thing of the past, where people are actually going, and the workforce is going, "Actually, no, Mark, we don't want you to continue breaking things. We want things that are meaningful." And this sort of pragmatic way of working, creating like multiple fast iterations to see which one sticks, is becoming like increasingly indefensible. People are looking for more, and they're looking for virtue. And the one writer even said that we need to move from like a minimum viable product to creating a minimum virtuous product. So the question then is how? Like, how do we design such a product and build like such a business model that's built not on something that's just viable and not just on cash, but actually on virtue, on something that is intrinsically good? And you can see that you can see times and in certain industries where this actually works. Like if you have kids at school and you have a good teacher, right? I can almost guarantee you that those teachers, my wife is a teacher as well, that those teachers aren't there for the money. Like I know that because I see those salary slips, right? That's not the reason they're there. The reason that they're there, if you ask them, is that they feel called to do it. And if you show me a school that works, like a school that does really well, whether it's in a poor community or whether it's in a wealthy community, I'll show you that the teachers in that school see their jobs as a vocation, as a calling. Now, what's interesting for me is that all like this language like virtue, calling, vocation, meaning, these are all kind of spiritual terms. And it's spirituality that actually imbues meaning into life and so into work, right? So now, before you completely like switch off and go, "Well, I'm not here to hear a sermon, I don't want to do this is not relevant to like big corporate business or my business," it's like, just stick with me for a while. So faith and spirituality and religion, all these things are meaning-making mechanisms. They answer really big questions like, why am I here? What do I need to be doing with my life? How do I react to my boss when she's being a complete, right? They answer those questions. And religion for me is like this, is this holder for spirituality. And you can often ask the questions, well, why don't we just talk about ethics? Why don't we talk about just about values? So value-based leadership, it works. But the challenge is if those values are imposed, they don't work well. And often when you go into a company, you get handed a leaflet or there's some values written on the wall, but nobody is actually living them. Sorry, my dog just walked into the room. How great is that? So ethics is about right and wrong, where religion and spirituality it's older and it's deeper and it's about more than just right and wrong. It's about good and evil and ultimate meaning. And that's what's lacking in so many people's lives and in business is meaning. So there are principles and practices, which we'll get to in just a while, principles and practices we can take from spirituality that has the capability to imbue meaning. And it's ingrained so deeply in us, right? So I'm Western. I always tell people I'm a Westerner, and therefore the Judeo-Christian values are like deeply ingrained in me. Things like forgiveness, loving your neighbor, being kind, not getting angry, or not like creating a big muck when you get angry. Those are ingrained in me. So when I work in a certain environment that amplifies those values, it's better for me, and that gives me meaning. It gives me a different story to tell. So just in a second, just so we're all on the same page, if you want to define spirituality, like what is it? Like if you can sort of try and remove it a little bit from all of that religious baggage and just try and get to the essence, to the real value of it. The spirituality is like, is the thing between the things. That's how I always describe it. Like the thing that exists between you and me, the relationship between us. Like the one writer, Heraclitus, he said that it's like the string of a bow, right? That's my previous picture there. It's like the string of a bow or the string of a violin. That it's the tension between the two things that actually makes the music, that actually makes the bow work. And in many spiritualities and many religions, there's like a very, very close tie between ora, prayer, et labora, work, between prayer and work. Like some of the monks, and I love these stories, and I'm crazy about all of these kind of monk stories. So some of the monks, they build these. One of my favorite books is like the business secrets of Trappist monks, right? They build these like multi-million-dollar international businesses by selling like crazy ordinary things like beer and mushrooms and eggs, right? And they build these huge businesses. And I've just started asking, and many people started asking, but why? Why does this work? What is actually going on in here? So here's one. These are the Trappist monks, right? So they make beer. They make some of the best beer in the world. And one of the beers that they make, or one specific Trappist monastery, is in Belgium called Westvleteren. If you've heard of Westvleteren, then you are very well educated in your beer taste or whatever. So Westvleteren sells like the best beer in the world. It's like the holy grail of beers. You can only get it at the monastery. You have to go. They now have a website. They actually only used to have like a telephone line. You have to call the line and then give your license registration of your car, and then you have to go in that car with your identification and obviously that car that you gave the license of, and you can pick up. You can only allow to buy 2 cases of this beer, and it's only like a limited amount that they bring out every single year, and you can only get it there. And there's like a massive black market for this beer, and it's insanely popular, and they do really, really, really well with it. So what's so fascinating for me, if this was any other company, you would license this beer and it would be all over the world. But they don't do that. They do it in a different kind of a way. So what's fascinating for me is I read kind of all these old rules of life from monks and monasteries from all sorts of different religions. And Saint Benedict, one of the monks, he famously wrote in his rule of life the section on prayer, and just after it, the section on work. And they believe that work is something that's formative, that's transformative. It combats idleness and promotes humility. So like the word humility actually derives from the Latin word humus, which means soil. So like getting your hands into the soil, working the soil is actually really good for you. So work is good for you. It was Jung as well, the famous psychiatrist, that said, often the hands will work out what the mind cannot. saying that you need to kind of work it out. So what's interesting about these rules of life is that the monk said that we're not going to be a burden on others. We're going to provide for ourselves, right? They don't beg, and they never during all history had slaves, and very seldom had servants. So, and then Saint Benedict also said, like, if you're busy working and the prayer bell goes, you have to continue working and just pray while you work, because work is that important. It's that formative. So I want to break it down, meaning spirituality gives us like these three things, these three sort of structures. And I think we can sort of take these three and apply them to our own lives and our own businesses, and kind of imbue them into our own businesses if we're clever, and then get that meaning making power to imbue it into our businesses and into our own lives. So three simple things, right? Something to be, something to want, and something to do. And I think these three things together is what gives us meaning. Something to be, something to want, and something to do. So the first one, something to be, is really about identity. And our identity as human beings that can create, that are creators and that are creative. So I'm really fascinated. I think just about in every single talk, I talk about blacksmiths, right? Because I'm fascinated by it. Like, it's such a crazy, I love this guy, like in his workshop, beating that tool. And so in the past, 25% of people, and I get this, about 100 years ago, 150 years ago, 25% of people listed their occupation as blacksmith, right? So a quarter of all people were blacksmiths. And blacksmiths, the job is making something. It's a creative thing. It's a creating action. Now, they're not making big artworks and crazy stuff. They're making horseshoes and hinges and tools, but there's an element of creativity to it. And if you think about it, and this sort of blew my mind, like, if you think about it, most jobs 100 and 150 years ago had some element of creativity in it. Now, most jobs actually don't. Most jobs actually are support jobs for the few creatives at the top. If you think about a massive company like Apple, for example, so you have the few designers at the top that create the objects and the devices, and then you have the massive amount of people underneath that support those few creative jobs. And I think it's our role as employers and as people to help people rediscover themselves, like their own creativity and what they are supposed to be bringing and creating, whether it's a spreadsheet or whether it's a horseshoe, right? So I love this quote from Ralph Aldo Emerson. Let me just open this door again. There you go. So I love this quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. He's really just one of my favorite people ever. It says, to be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. As those people, when they are truly themselves and they discover their true selves, and this is what spirituality teaches us that we need to do. This is a task that's being put before us, right? So those people, when they walk into a room, everybody stops because they are so fiercely real. And I love that. And that's something we all need, right? And that's why we should be investing in our people. We should be investing in them to help them discover themselves. And this little conversation between a CEO and a CFO, allegedly, it says, what if we invest in developing our people and they leave us? And it's saying, what if we don't and then they stay? Right? So there's nothing worse than the right person in the wrong job. Nothing worse than that. And we've seen this so many times. I used to have a coaching business where we coached corporates, and we've seen this like in meetings. We're literally in a session where people would switch responsibilities, almost like switch jobs when you're sitting in a circle, and they switch jobs going, I actually want to do that, and you actually want to do this, so let's just switch, because there's nothing worse than the right person in the wrong job. And being yourself has to do with being valuable. So does anybody know, like, if you can type in the comments, like, I would like send you a book if you know who this is. Like, if you know who this is, you can, but I wonder if I can get the chat open here. The first person who can tell me who this is, you can send me your address and I'll send you a book. Let's see if anybody got it. I've had, in all the times I've done this talk, like I had once somebody shout out, like it was at Remax. She went, "It's Rarity, Rarity." It's the My Little Pony called Rarity, right? So this was one of my daughter's favorite My Little Ponies, and Rarity taught me a lesson that when something is rare, it's valuable, right? Scarcity is what drives value. So the more scarce something is in a kind of capitalist free market economy, the more valuable it is. So the more unique something is, the more valuable it is. So why would you want to be like everybody else? You want to be rare. You want to be rarity. So here's a practice. Here's a practice that'll help you and help everybody that we can steal or take from spirituality to help us to discover who we are. And that's a simple practice. It's very popular right now, meditation or prayer. Meditation is a magnificent practice. If you do it, then well done, do it more. If you haven't started it, it's something that you need to try and look into. It's more than just sitting still. It's about witnessing what you are thinking. And the more you witness what you are thinking, the more you can discover who you are, and the more you can discover what you need to let go of. And that will get you to your identity, to your like full-on creative self. Like the second thing, it's something to want, something to desire. So Saint Ignatius often talks about desire. I think all great religions talk about desire, about wanting the right things. And I think that it's our responsibility as people that create businesses and just as human beings to give our people something to want, right? So to start to do something great, right? To create a better world. That's what you want. Marketing is about change, about changing behavior. So what do you want people to start doing? And is that good? What is this promise that you're making that you're going to change in the world? And do you keep it? So somebody scribbled on my screen. How crazy is that? So people want to be part of something, and they want to be part of something that matters. And this takes a great work to do. It has to be real. It has to be transformational, and it has to actually work, right? People want to be part of a bigger story, of a gigantic narrative. We are tribal creatures. We want to be part of something. We want to live this better story where the villain is defeated and the hero is reunited and transformed, right? So all great religions and all spiritualities and all great philosophies are embedded in narrative. So what story are you telling your people? Saying that this is the end goal. This is what we're driving towards. This is the change that we seek to make in the world. We're going to go through all of this chaos and build something that's awesome. That leads me to my second thing. It's like spirituality and all these practices gives us tools to deal with chaos. It's spirituality and the military are the only two kind of organizations that train their people to deal with chaos, to see past the chaos and like see a better world. So there's a great military maxim. It says, the more you sweat in training, the less you'll bleed in battle. Which is why we started this, which is why we started Paleastra, to have all of these practices to help us train. One of the first things that I said to our people in our community when lockdown started and all of this craziness started, I was going, this is what you train for. All of that time sitting in silence, all of that time sitting in meditation, all of that time spent on retreats alone in a mountain in a little cabin, this is what you're trained for. Like, you are going to ace this. So one of the ways, here's a practice for the second one, for something to want. One of the ways to figure out what you actually want is to start the practice of journaling, right? To sit down and actually write it out. It doesn't work in your head. You can't figure out in your head. You need to sit down with a pen and paper and ask why. And then every day sit and think back on your day and going, what worked today? What worked for us as a team? How do we feel about what we're busy with? And then how does that translate into the future? The last one is something to do. So you've got something to be, an identity, something to want, a desire, and then something to do. Now, that something to do is very specific. And this is one of the things that gives you meaning, that gives us all meaning in life. And that's to serve. It's so obvious, but we often miss it. To think about, I love how Seth Godin, when he talks about in his books about customers and the people that you're working with, he doesn't talk about, he talks about how do you serve those people? How do you serve their needs? And it's fascinating to me that in the last couple of years, the two kind of big buzzwords in big industries and big organizations are compassion and empathy. And I'm going, wait a minute. These are spiritual words. These are meaning words. Like Jeff Weiner from LinkedIn, the CEO of LinkedIn, his whole thing is about empathy, about compassion, to lead with compassion. And that takes seeing the world from the other person's point of view and tend to want the best for them, even if you don't like them, even if it means you have to help them get another job, like to seek first to understand and then to be understood. Compassion is a meaning generator. So the work is there. So in the monastic traditions, work is there so that you can give, so that you can carry your share of the burden. And it's these values that we need to tap into and build into our own lives. Just start being kind, being compassionate, being understanding, and then building it into our businesses. Like, how is this business compassionate? How is this business empathetic to the way the country is at the moment? How can we help? Like, that's like, it shouldn't be just one company's slogan. It should be all companies' slogan, right? The poet Hafiz, the Persian poet, this beautiful line. It says, even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Look at what happens with a love like that. It lights up the whole sky. And compassion, finally, is about giving up your right to be right, to learn how to actually listen. Like listening, the world is so listening poor right now. It's pretty damn easy to just start this little small practice and start standing out in front of everybody. Like if you're sitting in a conversation and you just actually give somebody your full attention, right? You don't pick up your phone, like, which is the worst thing you can do. You don't even check your smartwatch telling you should stand up. You just sit there and you look at the person. I can guarantee, like, this is so crazy. Like, try this. I want you to like challenge you to try this the next time you're having a conversation with somebody. It's just give your full attention, your full presence to that person and listen to them. You will blow their minds. Because our world is so listen poor. Like the bar is set at such a freaking low level. So just like a little bit of attention will blow somebody's mind. And if you can teach this and all the people in your organization to truly listen to one another, to truly be present, it's mind blowing. So here's the way that I do it. Is like when I sit with somebody and I feel my attention wandering, I use, similar to meditation, a practice where I just feel the breath on the top of my lip and use that as a little anchor to remind me to become present again to the person sitting in front of me. So I want to challenge you to try that and to try those things. So just to recap at the end of our session, like, meaning is important. It's massively important for human beings to move forward. Human beings have this need for transcendence, and you can't fill that need for transcendence with cash. It doesn't work. It actually has created like a profoundly sick society. Human beings need something to be, right? And that's a creative being. They need to be able to create something. They need to be valued for their unique identity, and they need to be helped to discover their unique identity. The second thing that they need that creates meaning is something to want, a goal to strive for, to be part of a bigger story, to be part of something that matters, not just something that turns a profit, but something that actually affects change in the world. That's what we want. So if you can tell your company's story like that or change it so it does that, that's what we all need. That's what we want, right? And then the last thing, something to do. And that something to do is to do it with compassion, to strive after this goal, to use your unique identity to strive after this goal, but do it with empathy and to do it with compassion and with caring. And when you have that triad, that generates meaning. And then you have happy workers and happy people. And happy people are productive and good people. And that's what we want. Then everybody wins, right? So thank you so much for listening.